It's not very often that a government will treat a cryptid or mystery animal so seriously that they have an official body or department to investigate it. But this happened in Soviet Russia in the 1950s, when the Soviet government had an official snowman commission. They had a group of scientists that were dedicated to looking at the Russian snowman, or Almasty as it's called. And these were based at the Darwin Museum in Moscow, and they took a number of expeditions up into the Ural Mountains in Russia. It was finally disbanded, but more recently there is a new Russian commission to search for the creature. What is the Almasty, you might ask? Well, it's different from the more familiar Yeti or Sasquatch. It seems to be more human-like. The Almasty is a hair-covered, man-like creature, standing between 6 and 7.5 feet tall, covered with long hair, usually a sort of a dark slate grey, black, or sometimes an auburn colour. It has a thick brow ridge, flat nose, deep set eyes, massively powerful jaws, no facial hair, and it has primitive tool use. The tool use has been compared with that of a chimpanzee. They don't seem to make fire, but they will hurl rocks to kill food items, wild goats and other animals, and they will also use clubs, but no fire. So whatever they are, they seem to be pretty primitive, but the Russians took them very, very seriously. And in this talk, I'm going to give a bit of a background to the Almasty and talk about my own expeditions in search of this creature. Well, there was a Russian polymath called Boris Prozhnev, and he was one of the people involved in the Snowman Commission, and he wrote a book called The Problem of the Relic Hominids, which was published in Russia, and he was completely convinced of their existence. And unfortunately the book, there's only ever about 200 copies of it. It was never available outside of Russia until now. The Centre for Fortean Zoology, which is the august organisation that I work for, tracked down his great-nephew, who owns the rights to the book, and we're publishing it for the first time in English. So a book that was only ever published in Russian, with 200 copies for sale, is now probably later in this year going to be out for the first time ever in English and freely available. And I've read the book myself, and it's an absolute mine of information that has never seen the light of day in the West so far. That's another thing I'm quite passionate about. There's cryptozoologists all over the world, in Japan, in Russia, in other countries, in South America, doing their research all in one language, and I'm very interested in translating the British stuff into other languages and exporting it abroad and vice versa, so we can share all this information. Marie-Jeanne Kaufmann was another scientist, half French, half Russian, a lady who was involved with the Almasty research, and she's in her late 90s now. She's still alive as far as I know. I believe she's living in Germany now, but she's never published anything. She has a lifetime's worth of notes. She only ever saw the Almasty once, but she interviewed many people in the Caucasus Mountains and took dozens and dozens of expeditions from the 1940s up to the 1990s. And she has a whole mountain of information and notes, and I'm hoping that one day we can get these translated, and I'm hoping that when she passes away they're not going to end up on somebody's bonfire or just left to rot. Anyway, I'll tell you about my own experiences with the Almasty, and then I'll have a go at trying to work out what this creature should be. There aren't any photographs, and I'll explain why later on. We had a bit of an incident in an ice crevasse. Well, I first met a man called Gregory Panchenko when he came to talk at the Weird Weekend, the original Weird Weekend down in Devon. And Gregory Panchenko is a Ukrainian biologist who's been studying the Almasty, and he came to give a talk down at Wolseley in Devon. And he told us of how he had been searching for the creature for about 19 years in the Caucasus Mountains, and on one occasion he had been called out to an old remote farmhouse. And in one of the stables there was an elderly mare being kept. At night, something was coming in and playing around with the mare and plaiting its mane. Now, horses at night, well, they'll move around and they'll tangle their own manes up. So I've always been pretty sceptical about this. But Gregory said he thought he would investigate this, and he left some food, some milk and some fruit and bread out in this barn, and then hid in the hay at twilight, and unfortunately fell asleep. When he woke up, he said it was night, but there was a full moon. He could see quite clearly. Next to the mare, there was a figure covered in grey fur, about 6 feet tall, that seemed to be messing around with the mare's mane, and the horse didn't seem to mind. The food and the milk were gone. The creature had eaten them, and it was making a sort of smacking noise with its mouth, and then twittering like a bird, making a twittering noise as it messed around with the horse's mane. And then it seemed to have amused itself sufficiently, jumped up onto a beam in the barn and went out through a hatch in the top of the barn. And he said he was, only about 6 foot away from it at one point. So we decided to take a CFZ expedition to the Caucasus Mountains in the southwest of Russia, and we teamed up with Gregory Panchenko and his friend. Gregory, by the way, is a biologist. His friend, who's a Ukrainian archaeologist called Anatoly Serendenko, and a Russian man called Alexei. And the first port of call in the Caucasus Mountains was an area that is known as the stepmother's teeth, because the mountains look like ragged, rotting teeth. And my first view of them, when they were looming up out of a bank of fog, and they looked absolutely spectacular. And on the drive up to this area, the roads were only cut through these hills fairly recently, and they've gone through burial grounds and tombs of Salmatians, who were people who lived there centuries ago. And Anatoly, the archaeologist, has spent years cataloguing various items from these tombs, and they said they found these bizarre skulls that had these elongated heads, and when he first saw them, he thought they might be of the Almasty, but it soon became clear that these were human skulls that had just been bound when the individuals were infants. So their skulls grew this strange elongate shape. They do it in some South and Central American cultures, and sometimes people try and pass these things off as alien skulls, but they're not. They're just human skulls that have grown in this bizarre way because the baby's head has been bound, so the bone's grown in a weird way. Now we explored some caves in these areas up in the mountains. We found some thick shards of bone, but they were nothing more than the bones of a mountain goat. But we put some camera traps up there, and the traps we generally use, they're motion sensitive, but they're also triggered by heat as well when something goes by them. So they'll take a photograph or film of something that moves or has a heat signature. Unfortunately, all we got is some vegetation moving and the sun rising and falling. I've probably mentioned this before, but we tested these cameras out in Britain, and we found that if you only leave them for a few days or a week or so, you get very little, maybe a couple of birds. But if you leave them up in the woods for a long time, you'll get a lot of things. So if you leave them up for a few months, we've got otters, badgers, foxes, deers, woodpeckers, and a woman having a piss in the bushes. So they really need to be left for a very long time. And unfortunately, on these expeditions, we're only there for 2 or 3 weeks. So we're looking now into possibly getting cameras that we leave permanently in an area, and you can upload the photographs via satellite. That's something we're looking into now. But I'm not a tech man at all, like Frank Spencer or anything like Around the campfires at night, they told us, Gregory, Anatoly and others, told us about some of the stories they'd heard about the Almasty and its interactions with man and other cryptids in the area. We've already heard about Gregory's encounter. Anatoly said he was near another abandoned farmhouse when he saw a very tall, grey-haired Almasty walking through long grass. There was another case where an Almasty, people say, will approach remote human settlements in search of food. Unlike the Yeti, seems to keep away from people. It's a misanthrope. It wants nothing to do with human beings. But the Almasty will approach people, generally in search of food. And one of these things broke into a farmhouse, killed a big guard dog with a club, and made off with a big roll of Sarmatian cheese. God knows why it wanted to have tried this stuff. It tastes like rubber. Another story of a farmer who saw an Almasty near a grain silo, and he was worried he was trying to steal his grain. So he threw a rock at it, and then retreated to the side of his house. Suddenly a massive rock came sailing over his house and nearly missed it. And in the morning it took 2 men to lift this rock off the floor. And apparently the Almasty had lifted this rock, but it took 2 men to even get off the floor and threw it clear across his house. The other cryptids in the area, there are stories of an immensely big snake, far larger than anything known in the area. In the south of Kabardino-Balkaria, Anatoly, many years ago, had been exploring a cave when he encountered in a pool in the cave an enormous snake he estimated to be 23 feet or 7 metres long. His father, many years ago, was in a swamp in Kazakhstan, in former Soviet Central Asia, when he saw something sticking up out of the swamp. And at first he thought it was a man standing up. And as he moved towards it, he realised it was the head and neck of a huge snake, maybe 30 feet long. And the head and neck were reared up out of the water. And Gregory thinks that some of the lake monster sightings in parts of Russia and the former Soviet Central Asia are actually these large snakes when they're swimming, holding their heads up out of the water. There's nothing in the area that big that is known to science, but it's very interesting that the area in question, this part of the Caucasus, was the area that Jason was supposed to have visited in the famous Greek tale of Jason the Argonauts. He used to be called Caucasus, and all legends have a basis in fact. And in that area in ancient times they used to use sheep's fleeces to pan for gold. They'd let the water run through them and the gold would collect on the fleece, which is maybe where the idea of the golden fleece came from. The dragon that guarded the golden fleece, and Greek dragons would tend to be enormous snakes rather than the true winged quadrupedal fire-breathing dragons you find elsewhere. So these stories would have been initially based on an encounter with one of these very large snakes. So we moved on to another area where we were introduced to a man named Sergit. This man claimed to have seen the body of an Almasty up on a mountain in Elbrus National Park. And he said he was climbing there with his friend and he came upon the body of a dead female Almasty. So he realised this was important and he covered it with stones. This was a couple of years before we were there. And he said, hopefully it's still there, and I'll try and lead you up there and try and find the place where we left this body. So we thought, now if this story's on the level, if any of this body is left, job done, we can take it back, get it analysed, we could prove that this thing exists. So we set up this mountain, and Sergit is dressed in slacks, a t-shirt, he's got a sweater tied around his neck, he's wearing brothel creepers, so we think, this isn't going to be a major hike, he's dressed like that, he's not going up, anywhere dangerous, so it'll probably be on the lower slopes that he's found this thing. So we follow him up this mountain and we keep getting higher and higher and higher, and then we reach the snow line. And then there's a massive boulder about the size of this stage. And there are all like little plaques and photographs on it. And I wonder what that is. So I go over and have a look. And it's sort of a memorial to all these people who have died on this incredibly dangerous mountain that he's now taking us up with no climbing gear. So we go higher and higher and higher up this bloody treacherous mountain. And everyone is walking across what looks like a flat expanse of snow. And they're walking across it. Now, I'm technically what's known scientifically as a fat bastard. So, I try and walk across it, only to find out that it's just compacted snow above some sort of great crevasse. And it gives way, I slip through it, my camera goes off somewhere, I never see it again. And suddenly I find myself sliding down this great sheet of snow and ice towards a 300-foot drop with spiky rocks at the bottom. So I have to jam my feet onto some rocks to stop myself sliding down and clamber back up. And it's obvious I can't get too heavy to get across this expanse of snow. So the others go on ahead and I have to try and get back to base camp on my own. I take a wrong turn on the way back and find myself walking along the edge of a cliff that's been gouged out by a retreating glacier that rumbles every so often, and it's about a 50-foot drop down to the ice. I'm walking along that, and a whole section collapses and leaves me hanging onto the roots of a tree like Indiana Jones. So I have to haul myself up, and this is less than an hour after I've nearly gone over the crevasse, and climb back up and find my way back down to the camp, which is in a little village at the base of the mountain. So everybody comes back eventually. I can see them all going up further and further. They come back, they haven't found the body. So, next day I'm damn fool enough to go up the mountain again to look for this body, get so far up and start blacking out through altitude sickness. And thought, right, this mountain's got it in for me, I better go back to base camp. Once again, they don't uncover any body. So the following day we split up, and a friend of mine, Dave Archer, who has been on many CSA expeditions and actually saw the orangutan deck on his very first expedition and his first day in the jungle, actually. He was lucky enough to see the orangutan deck in Sumatra. We split up. He goes back up the mountain again to look at this other area where there's supposed to be a cave with some sort of nest in it. And the rest of us go off to visit a witness. Now, we talked to a man called Bahar Tilov, and he saw he had two encounters with the Almasty. One was with what seemed to be a family group of them, a larger black individual and two smaller grey-coloured ones, whilst he was working in irrigation. And he saw the creatures wandering through the rocks. When they saw him, they turned around and moved away again. Another time, he says he was with some German tourists, and they were visiting an abandoned house, and he saw a big black Almasty entering this house, and it turned around and bared its fangs at them, and none of them wanted to go any closer to this place. But he, like many of the witnesses we talked to, seemed to take it completely in their stride. One thing that we found again and again is that people just accept these things. They're no more bizarre to them than a wolf or a bear or any other wildlife. Maybe a little bit rarer. There's a taboo against hunting the Almasty because it's believed to be a wild man rather than an animal. And there was one story about a hunter who had got his rifle out and he got his sights on something he thought was a bear, and then it stood up on its hind legs and walked away. He realised it was an Almasty, so he didn't shoot it. Anyway, when we get back to camp, Dave has come down with a body bag. He's got a body bag with him, but it hasn't got a body in it. He's just brought this nest of dwarf rhododendron down that he found. So we sift through it all to find as much hair as we can from it, and we get, with tweezers, we get a number of hairs out of it. which were later sent away to Dr. Scott Dissertell in New York for DNA analysis. And unfortunately, they all turned out to be human hairs. So what we think, it was just a hunter, maybe had made a camp up there or was caught in some adverse weather, made a little bundle of rhododendron leaves just to keep warm. It was sadly nothing to do with the Almasty. Then another witness we talked to was an old man who claimed that his father had saw an Almasty, which would have been in probably the closing years of the 19th century. Most of the reports we had were quite recent, but this was the oldest one. And he said his father had told him that as a boy he lived in a big house, part of which was not used because the ceiling had collapsed. And one day he went into this disused part of the house and found a young Almasty sitting in a chair. And he said its head was bent forward and the hair was falling down in front of its face. The Almasty is covered with hair, but it seems to have longer hair on the head, almost like a mane that goes down to its shoulders. And sometimes it will flop in front of the animal's face. And he said it reared its head up and looked at him. And he said it had sort of very venous looking eyes, very bloodshot looking eyes. And he ran away. When he came back with his family, the creature had gone. The most interesting person we talked to, Elbrus National Park, was actually the deputy head of the park, who was a doctor of geological science. And several years before, he told us that he had lost some sheep. This man's name was Tahir, and he had lost some sheep, and he was out looking for them. And he saw something lying on the floor, which at first he thought was a cow lying on the floor, and then it stood up on its hind legs like a man. And it was at twilight, and he thought it was a very big human being. He shouted out to him, "Have you seen some sheep?" He talked in Russian, and he talked in the local dialect as well, didn't get an answer. And then the creature started walking away up the hill, and he noticed he had this sagittal crest, dome-shaped head, massive shoulders, and seemed to be covered in hair. And he realised what he was looking at was an Almasty, and he ran to get his uncle, but by the time he returned with his uncle, the creature had gone. So that's a doctor of geological science who reports to have seen one of these things. Anyway, we move on to a little town called Neutrino. Now, it's a very strange thing that the Caucasus Mountains are amazingly beautiful, these alpine-looking vistas of great snow-capped mountains and forests and waterfalls that look wonderfully pristine. Then in the middle of them there are villages, but they're not sort of quaint little Moomin-esque alpine villages. They're ugly, grey, nasty, grotty, Eastern Bloc things. And Neutrino is no exception. It's quite a small village, but it's made up almost entirely of tower blocks, many of which are completely abandoned because when the Soviet Union collapsed, they were never finished. They were just empty shells. So half the buildings there are empty. Anyway, cows wander in and out of people's houses and all sorts of things. There's rubbish everywhere. But we were there to stake out a farmhouse a few miles out of town where there had been a number of Almasty sightings. Now, whilst we were staying in this little flat, this whole bunch of us pushed into this little flat, there was a guy with us called Keith. Now, Keith has been on a couple of expeditions with me, and he's also been on a few expeditions with my friend Adam Davis. And on the first day, when we got to the Stepmother's Teeth, he looked up at the mountains and said, "Nah, no, I'm not doing that." And he stayed in the camp. When he was in Sumatra with Adam, he looked up at the mountain there to climb to get to the jungle and went, "Nah, I'm not doing that," and stayed in the village. and whilst he was with us, he took one trip into some woods, got stung by some stingers, and then stayed in the camp for the rest of the expedition. But this guy Keith, he was out on a balcony, you know the balcony, and he shouts to us, "There's a cow out here eating a fire." And I said, "What? There's a cow eating a fire?" So we came to investigate, and there was indeed a cow eating a fire. There was this brown cow, and it got this little smouldering fire, and it started to eat the fire. And occasionally it would jerk back as if it scorched its lips, and then it would carry on eating the fire. And another cow came along to try and share the fire, a little black cow, and the bigger brown cow chased it away. No, this is my fire, and carried on eating the fire. And whether it was wanting the mineral content of the charcoal, I don't know, but we did see a cow eating a fire. One to tick off the bucket list. Anyway, we did a couple of things whilst we were in Neutrino. During the day, we went up above the snow line to the mountains around there to try and look for animal remains, because there was a theory that Gregory had that animals that get killed in avalanches, the Almasty will scavenge their carcasses. The Almasty is an omnivore. Its ecological twin is the brown bear. It has a very similar diet to the brown bear, and it can live anywhere the brown bear can live, basically. And we were setting off to the mountains, and there were a number of little streams and a small wood beyond these streams, and we heard this bizarre screaming from inside these woods. And Gregory said, I don't know what that is, I don't recognise that as any animal. It was no animal I recognised. It was very loud, screaming noise. And I whipped my camera out thinking, God, could this be an Almasty in here? So we split up, surrounded this little island that was covered with trees and surrounded by streams. Went charging through these streams, all with our cameras out, thinking there's a possibility there might be an Almasty in here and catch on fire. What emerges from the trees is that guy Alexei screaming his head up, just tricking us. It's a really good job we haven't got tranquilizer guns or anything. Anyway, Gregory says, right, well, we're going up this mountain to look for the remains of dead animals that the Almasty might have scavenged. And he says, there might be a few little streams you have to wade through. So, we go up the mountains. Turns out the few little streams you have to wade through are bleeding, raging torrents, great big rivers that are thundering the white water that we have to gingerly cross, holding on to poles and stuff. I slip over, go underwater, and I'm nearly washed away, and he manages to grab me by the scruff of the neck and pull me out. He has this thing, Gregory, of saying, oh, well, I think this is the best way for us, it's not very difficult, or this way is the best, and taking us over incredibly dangerous places. I'll talk more about that later on. Anyway, we go up to the snow line. All we found is one very old dead cow, and there's hardly anything of it left. So it was a bit of a washout. But that evening we go to stake out the old farmhouse. And there's a story behind this farmhouse. It was abandoned in 1973 after a triple murder. There was an old couple that lived there, and the man had amassed quite a lot of money that he was storing in the house. One of his relatives wanted that money and came with a couple of his friends to the house. There was an altercation, the old man was stabbed. His wife got hold of the knife, stabbed the murderer. The murderer's friends overpowered her and stabbed her, grabbed the money and tried to leg it, but were finally caught by the police and sent to prison. So it's been abandoned since 1973. But occasionally shepherds hang out in there, and it consists mainly of 3 rooms with an L-shaped veranda running around the outside. Now this is the place that Anatoly saw the large, tall grey Almasty some years before, and he said about 8 years ago, in another case, some shepherds were on the veranda one night when the door at the end of the veranda opened and a 7-foot Almasty stood there, walked along the veranda, just moved the guys out of the way, came to the end of the veranda, leapt off and disappeared into the forest. So, we set up a bunch of camera traps and we lay out some bait. They're supposed to be very fond of wine. If you leave out wine for them or any kind of booze, they'll drink it. And we'll touch on that a bit later on in the story. So we brewed up some red wine and honey, heated it up, left pails of it out, lots of cherries, meat, fruit in several areas around this farm and around some of the other outbuildings in the farm. And we set up the camera traps. We had about 4 camera traps all around the area. We were told that the creatures turn up in the night, and then there's a lull in activity at about 2:30 in the morning. So we basically stood there in the dark, just watching, cameras wedding, watching, listening, and for hours nothing happened, just darkness and silence. And then I hear a noise like the twittering of a bird, but it's like the middle of the night, the birds are all in their nests. And I remember that Gregory has told me that these things make a twittering noise rather like a bird. Then one of the camera traps goes off, there's a flash. I think, could this have caught an Almasty? Was that an Almasty making that vocalisation? But then nothing more happened. Gets to 2:30 in the morning and it's getting very cold. So there's 3 of us, myself, a guy called Dave Archer, who saw the orang pendek, and a guy called Adam Davis. And we go into one of the rooms and warm ourselves up around an old stove that we've got going. And Dave falls asleep on a manky old mattress in there, and Adam and I are just sitting warming ourselves. Now, the door to this room, goes into this room, is about, it faces directly onto the veranda, about 7 feet tall. And it's slightly ajar, about maybe 3 inches ajar. It's a clear night, there's starlight and moonlight coming through. Then about 2:30 in the morning, we hear this deep guttural vocalisation. It sounds something like but very deep and throaty, like whatever has done it has got very large lungs. So I look at Adam and say, "Did you hear that?" And he nods his head. About 25 seconds later, something walks along the veranda. Whatever that thing is, it's on 2 legs, and it's at least 7 feet tall, because as it passes the door, you can see the moonlight and the starlight very briefly are blocked out when the thing passes. And I said to Tom, "There's something on the veranda." So we grab our digital cameras, race out onto the veranda, whatever it is gone, and we do a circuit of the farm. But all we find is darkness and silence. There's nothing there. Whatever it is has disappeared. None of the bait was touched, and in the morning, when we checked the camera traps, all we got is vegetation moving. So it's possible that I was about 12 foot away from a 7 foot plus Almasty that night. If it was a human being, it was a remarkably tall human being who moved with remarkable grace and silence. That's the only other thing it could have been. Bears stand up on their hind legs, but it's a threat posture. They don't walk around habitually on their hind legs, and it would have made a lot more noise. A bear clambering onto that veranda, it would have had to have opened the door to get in first, and then walking along the veranda, you'd have heard its claws against the floor. So I don't really think of what else it could be. Anyway, we return the next night, stake the place out again, but there's nothing happens. Just silence all night. Now, Sergit, who I mentioned earlier, led us up on this goose chase up the mountain. We tracked down the friend who he was up the mountain with, who said, "I've no idea what he was talking about. We never found a dead Almasty up the mountain. He's talking bollocks." You know, he says that in Russian, and there's a translator. That's absolute nonsense. So Sergit comes back to this little flat, saying, "Oh yes, well we couldn't find the body because Jinn, which are Islamic demons, have spirited the body away." So we think, "Oh right, okay, no one's driving. We've got a loony here." And he says, "But I kept a hair of it. I kept a tooth and a hair. And the tooth I gave to a friend of mine as a magic charm, but she seems to have lost it." but I've got a hare, and there's a hare which was nothing more than a vegetable fibre. So Sergey's story was absolute rubbish, and it seems like he had some sort of mental problems. But the other people we talked to made no such weird claims. They didn't seem to think there was anything spiritual attached to the Almasty. It was just another form of life, another creature. And a case in point is we went to meet an old couple who lived in a farmhouse on the edge of a small town. A number of years ago, the man said he'd met a young Almasty in his garden. He'd been sitting at home at night, a pebble hit the window, and he thought it was his son, seeing if anybody was in. He called out to his son, yeah, come in, the door's open. No answer. Another pebble hit, he shouts again, the door's open, come in. And so when he gets no answer again, he goes out into the garden, and it's at night, but in the corner of the garden he sees a small hairy figure about 5 feet tall. Doesn't get a good look at the face, there's hair hanging down all over it. But he notices the hand is very like a human hand. And it seems to be making gestures, which he interprets that it wants food. So he left some food out for it, some brick, which it took. And he had the feeling that there was another smaller one back in the shadows. His wife, in Kazakhstan, when she was in Kazakhstan as a girl, shortly after the war, also saw a young Almasty, and she said she'd visited in broad daylight the house of a friend of hers, and when she went into the house she saw all the children in the corner crying, and she said, what's the matter? They're scared of the thing in the garden. And she opened the window, which wasn't a glass window, it was wooden flaps, hinges, in the side of the house, and she says she saw this creature about 5 feet tall, covered with long hair, the hair drooping down in front of its face, and the description she gave reminded me of Cousin It from the Addams Family, if you remember that. I always preferred the Munsters myself, but there you go. The hair was fallen down in front of its face so you couldn't see its features, but it was making these bizarre bird-like twittering noises, which again, another witness says it makes these twittering noises, and it seemed to be amusing itself by scooping up bits of wet mud and throwing it at the house, and it was doing this, I think, purely for play. It seemed to be a young one, but the children in the house were terrified, and she said when she left, it was still there. It was there for over an hour, just dicking about, basically, throwing mud at the house. Both of them couldn't understand why a group of scientists had come all the way from England just to look for the Almasty. She said, why have you come all this way just for this? Because it would be, to them, it'd be like them coming all the way to England just to look for badgers or something, because they accept the reality of them so completely. And there's nothing fantastical about them. So, all of the witnesses seem to tally, even down to the noises the animals made. We thought it was a very successful expedition, and at some point we wanted to come back. And a number of years later, in fact just last year, we did return to Russia, to the very same area with Anatoly and Gregory. But unfortunately, the areas that way back in 2008 had been pretty wild were now full of people. We stopped at an old abandoned Soviet castle. It looked ancient, but it's actually only made in the 30s, and it wouldn't look out of place in an episode of Scooby-Doo. And some of us camped outside, and some of us camped in the castle, in this old abandoned castle in this valley. But loads of youths rocked up in the middle of the night, playing guitars and drinking and shining torches around and necking down vodka, and then one guy got completely pissed on vodka and got a shotgun out, and I thought, oh right, we better move on now. And everywhere we camped, everywhere we went to, there seemed to be lots of people. And the stories we heard about the Almasty weren't recent, they were all back at the time when we were there before, about 10 years previously. We did talk to one man who knew the old man who had seen the Almasty begging outside of his house. He was his cousin, I think. And he went down round to the house the day after, heard the story, went out into the garden and found 2 sets of tracks of a young Almasty and an even younger one. So the old man was right, I think there was a second, even smaller, younger individual out there. Gregory led us on a treacherous hike across some cliffs to get to a cave where there might have been bones. And this was about a 500-foot drop into rapids. And the path was about this wide. So we were like this. And then the path peters out, so we're just clinging to bare rock. And my friend Jackie there, give everybody a wave, Jackie. Jackie, at one point, Jackie slips and falls, and we grab her, thankfully, before she plummets to a grisly death. But in the cave there was nothing except what might have been some old bare bones. So it was all but the second Almaty expedition was a washout. The first one, lots of witnesses, and we think we got close to the creature.
You've got the human skulls though, didn't you?
We did find a human skull. It was probably from somebody killed in World War II. But not hide nor hair of the Almasty in a place where stories of it were rife just 10 years before. So I think personally that human intervention there has just got too much, and the creature has retreated back into the wilderness. I'm hoping later this year I'm going to go to Tajikistan, which is a much more unspoiled place. It's in former Soviet Central Asia, North of Afghanistan, in the Hominid Valley, where there are identical creatures reported, and there are far fewer people, so knock on Formica, we might turn something up there. But, so, what is the Almasty? Now, the Yeti of the Himalayas, Tibet, Northern India, which I've also hunted for, seems to be some sort of gigantic upright walking ape, maybe a surviving strain of the giant fossil ape Gigantopithecus blacki, which is known from its teeth and jaws and would have been considerably bigger than a mountain gorilla. But the Almasty seemed curiously much more human, and indeed there are a number of tales of Almasties interbreeding with humans. We found recently a whole new set of evidence for completely unknown species of hominins, relatives of the ancestors of man. Do you remember in about 2005, on the Indonesian island of Flores, they unearthed the remains of a tiny little people that they dubbed the hobbits, Homo floresiensis. These were subfossil remains found in a cave on the island of Flores, and originally they were thought to be a dwarf island form of Homo erectus. When animals move into islands, the small ones get big and big ones get small. Island dwarfism is called, or island gigantism, depending which way it's going. But a more recent study of the bones suggests that they were not from Homo erectus at all, not a dwarf form of Homo erectus, but they were more closely related to Homo habilis, a much more primitive form of hominin, which lived in East Africa. Was supposed to have died out nearly 2 million years ago. So you've got something nearly 2 million years out of time, half a world away from where it was supposed to be, which begs the question, what else is out there? Well, they've found recently 2 new species of hominin, only 14,000 years old, fossil bones from Red Deer Cave in China. They haven't even been given names yet, those species, but they also seem to be descendants of Homo habilis. In a cave in Siberia, we found finger bones and toe bones of a group of people called the Denisovans, and they were so well preserved, these finger and toe bones, that a whole genome was taken from these bones, and we know that they were distinct from modern man, distinct from the Neanderthals. They were a whole different lineage. But it seems that, like the Neanderthal, they bred with modern man. We have some of their genes in us, and indeed we have the genes of Neanderthals in us as well, so there was crossbreeding between the different types. There seems to be people from New Guinea and the Solomon Islands in that area, they seem to have a genetic marker in their makeup which suggests yet another unknown species of hominin. Sub-Saharan Africans have another marker on that, which also seems to suggest another species of hominin we know nothing about. We don't even have the bones for these yet. We just have the genetic basis in the makeup of the races. And one of the most interesting stories is that of a female Almasty called Zaina, who was supposed to have been captured in 1890 in the Caucasus Mountains. Now, there is a geneticist called Professor Brian Sykes, one of the world's leading geneticists. He wrote a book called The Seven Daughters of Eve, where he traces back all of mankind to 7 women in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, he started a project where he asked people to send him the hair of mystery primates, Yeti, Orang-Pendek, Almasty, Bigfoot, and so on. And he wrote a book about his findings. He perfected a new way of isolating the DNA and getting rid of all the contaminants. And what he found, with all the hair he was given, they were all red herrings. They were bears or wolves or pigs or humans or other things. But he was sent some teeth. He was sent 2 teeth from the skull of a man called Quit, who died in 1953 and who was supposed to have been the son of Zaina, the Almasty, who was captured in 1890. And her story goes something like this. She was found running wild in the woods. She was captured, lassoed, brought to a village. And she was about 6 foot 9 inches tall, long drooping breasts, covered in reddish black hair, black skin, thick brow ridge, flat, ape-like nose, powerful jaws, big teeth that were likened to a horse's teeth, massive hands. And she was kept in a stockade until she was tamed down. And she tamed fairly quickly. She never ever learned to talk, but she became completely tame and would do menial tasks around the farm. She was immensely strong, so she could carry heavy weights like bags of flour and so forth. And she was supposed to be able to crack nuts with her teeth. Her jaws were so powerful. And she was fed on a diet of raw meat and bread and fruit and things. Would never ever stay in a house or a heated room for a length of time because she'd sweat profusely. So she had her own enclosure outdoors. Now, she was very fond of any kind of alcohol or booze. As she got hold of booze, she would just drink and drink and drink until she was completely insensible. And while she was insensible, several of the local men raped her. So she ended up having a number, in fact a string of hybrid children. And the first couple she tried to wash in a river. And because they were hybrid children, they didn't have the strength to withstand this, and they died of shock. So subsequently, the children were taken away from her and raised in the village. Now, the children seemed to be perfectly normal. They looked like modern human beings. They didn't have the massive brow ridge or the hairy skin. They were swarthier and taller than the local population, much stronger. In fact, they said the children of Zana, when they grew up, they could stand behind a person sitting on a chair, grab the back of the chair in their jaws and lift the person on the chair off the ground. And they, like their mother, they could crack nuts with their teeth. They were so strong. She had a couple of sons and a couple of daughters. And Zaina herself died around about, she was captured in 1850 and she died in 1890. So she was living for 40 years in this village. And her children, the youngest son, Quint, only died in 1953. So Russian researchers found his grave, they dug up his skull, and the skull looked within the parameters of a modern human, although the jaws were quite powerfully built. It was in the Darwin Museum at Moscow for a number of years, until a researcher called Igor Burtsev brought it. And Igor Burtsev sent a couple of teeth to Professor Brian Sykes in the hope he could isolate the mitochondrial DNA. That's the DNA from the mother's side. And the mitochondrial DNA is all to do with triggering energy release in the cells. And it's inherited from the mother. So he got these 2 old teeth, and amazingly, he got DNA from them, mitochondrial DNA. And he said, and he writes this in his book, and I've been in personal communication with him again, is that the DNA is sub-Saharan African and appears to be pre-human. He thinks that it's a undiscovered form of hominin that would have arose in West Africa rather than East Africa and would have left Africa about 150,000 years ago. And he believes that whatever these creatures are, they're still in the Caucasus Mountains. He's still doing research on the DNA, even as we speak, so I await with bated breath what his findings were, or are. So we've got both fossil evidence, and it's looking like DNA evidence now, that these relatives of the ancestors of man lived a lot more recently than we thought. There are a lot more of them, and they may still be around. So it seems that the Almasty is one of these creatures, maybe an early offshoot of Homo habilis, a totally separate lineage to our ancestors, which came from Homo erectus. So we've got a whole other form of primitive man, ultra-primitive man, without fire, ape-like in appearance, very primitive tool use. But it seems that they're there in the mountains of Russia and the former Soviet Central Asia. So I'm off again for another crack at finding one of them, hopefully this summer.